In 1863, a photograph meant to show property ended up capturing something far deeper: real human lives. Dr. Rachel Torres had worked for 8 years at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, but even now, certain discoveries could still stop her in her tracks. One hot morning in August 2024, Rachel was in the museum's archive, sorting through a set of Civil War-era photographs that had just arrived from a private estate in Louisiana. The photos came from the family of a Union Army quartermaster who had collected Confederate property during the last years of the war. Along with paperwork like supply lists and military orders, the collection included dozens of photographs, some showing battlefields, some military officers, and some of southern plantations taken over by Union troops. But one photo stood out. Unlike the others, it was placed in an expensive frame, clearly important to whoever first owned it. The picture showed 23 black individuals arranged in 3 rows in front of a grand plantation home. They were enslaved people. Rachel had seen similar photos before. Some plantation owners had pictures taken to document the people they enslaved, mostly for insurance or legal reasons. But what caught Rachel's attention this time was the note on the back of the frame. Written in neat handwriting from the 1800s, it read, "Belterre Plantation, Louisiana. Property record, April 1863. Taken by order of Colonel Marcus Beaumont for evacuation. Total value, $18 to $400. The back also listed each person's name, age, job, and estimated dollar value. Rachel's hand shook slightly as she read it. These weren't just entries in a logbook. These were real people, whose faces now looked back at her from the photo. Their worth had been reduced to money, but their presence said more. Looking more closely at the picture, Rachel noticed something unusual. The group wasn't arranged at random. There was a quiet order to how they stood, some holding hands, others standing just close enough to suggest connection. It wasn't staged by accident. She grabbed her digital tools and zoomed in. That's when she spotted him, a man in his late 30s, standing in the second row, calm and composed. His right hand rested gently on the shoulder of a young boy next to him. The placement wasn't casual. It was intentional and protective. Rachel turned the photo over again. The name next to his entry, Benjamin, age 38, field worker, valued at $200. "What were you trying to tell us, Benjamin?" she whispered. Over the next few days, she used advanced imaging to study the photo more deeply. These tools could pick up tiny details: the look on someone's face, a slight movement, clues about relationships or feelings the original photographer likely never noticed. The more she analyzed the picture, the more convinced she became. This group of 23 people hadn't just stood where someone told them to. They had chosen where to stand, and with whom. Benjamin stood in the middle of the second row. Next to him was Thomas, age 9, listed as a house servant, and valued at $600. To Benjamin's other side stood Sarah, age 35, a cook valued at $900. Her hand was partly hidden in her dress, but enhanced imaging revealed that her fingers stretched just slightly toward Benjamin's arm, close but not touching. In the front row, right in front of Benjamin, sat an older woman listed as Mama Rose, age 71. She had no job listed and was valued at just $50, likely considered too old to work. But her spot in the photo, centered in front of Benjamin, seemed meaningful. Rachel began mapping who stood where, who was touching or looking at whom. Patterns appeared. This group wasn't just a lineup. It was families, arranged with care, quietly resisting the idea that they were just property. She then reviewed the historical documents that came with the photo, Confederate records, Union seizure orders, and most helpful, a partial plantation ledger from Belterre dating from 1860 to 1863. Her hunch was right. Benjamin wasn't alone in the records. The ledger listed his family: his wife Sarah, their children Thomas, age 9, little Benjamin, age 6, Grace, age 4, and his mother, Rose. They were a family. And even in a photo taken to record them as possessions, they had managed to show something more: their bond, their dignity, and their love. To understand why this photo was taken in the first place, Rachel dug into what was happening in Louisiana in April 1863. She pulled up military records and old newspapers to build a timeline. By then, the Union Army had control of New Orleans and was pushing further up the Mississippi River into Louisiana. Plantation owners had a tough choice: stay and risk losing everything to Union forces, or move further into Confederate territory and take whatever they could. Belterre Plantation was about 60 miles northwest of New Orleans, right in the Union Army's path. Its owner, Colonel Marcus Beaumont, was away fighting for Confederacy and had left the plantation under the care of his wife and an overseer. By spring, Beaumont knew the plantation would soon be captured. Rachel found a letter he had sent to his wife in March 1863. It was stored in the Louisiana State Archives. He wrote, "Dearest Eve, prepare to leave Belterre by the end of April. Take the silver, the papers, and anything else you can fit in the wagons. The enslaved people will be moved to our cousin's plantation in Texas. I've arranged for a photographer to document them before they go. We'll need proof of ownership for future compensation or insurance." So that's why the photo was taken. It was a way to keep record in case the people in it were lost, freed, or taken by Union forces. A legal document wrapped in an image. Rachel also found records from the photographer. His name was Henry Don, based in New Orleans, but he had moved inland when Union troops came close. He had been hired by wealthy families to take what he called property documentation photographs, meant to protect their claims during the chaos of war. In Durand's account book, there was a short note about the Belterre job. Dated April 15, 1863, it read, "Beaumont Plantation, 23 subjects, 25 door 0 completed satisfactory." The people in the photo weren't listed as individuals or families, just subjects. Property, things to be recorded, no different from chairs or livestock. But Rachel was starting to see it another way. Benjamin clearly had. He seemed to understand something that neither Colonel Beaumont nor Durand did. This could have been the only photo of his family that would ever exist. Rachel wanted to understand what Benjamin might have known about photography at the time. She began researching how enslaved people experienced photography during the Civil War and spoke with experts on the subject. In 1863, photography was still new and expensive. It was mostly something wealthy white families could afford. Enslaved people were photographed occasionally, but usually just for documentation, research, or as background in their owners' portraits. The idea of black families having their own photographs taken was almost unheard of in the South. Still, Benjamin would have known what a photograph was. He'd likely seen family portraits hanging in the plantation house. Maybe he had watched photographers come by to take pictures during weddings, baptisms, or celebrations, always focused on the slave-owning families. Then Rachel found something remarkable, a written testimony from Benjamin, recorded by the Freedmen's Bureau in 1865, 2 years after the photo was taken. He had filed a claim while trying to locate his mother, Rose, and his youngest daughter, Grace, who had been separated from him during the war. In his statement, Benjamin described the photo. In April 1863, before they sent us to Texas, the master brought a picture man. He lined us up like we were bundles of tobacco, but I knew what a photograph was. I'd seen them in the big house. I knew it might be the only picture my family ever taken. So when the man arranged us, I made sure I stood next to my son Thomas. I made sure Sarah was close. I had Mama Rose sit right in front where I could see her. The man didn't care where we stood, as long as we stayed still. So I arranged my family. If that picture still exists, it shows we were together. It shows we were a family, not just property. Rachel leaned back from her computer, moved and shaken. Benjamin had understood the moment perfectly. He knew that photo wasn't just about ownership. He turned it into something that proved their love, their connection, their identity as a family. A picture meant to record value had become something far more powerful, a quiet act of resistance. Rachel's next step was to trace what happened to Benjamin and his loved ones after that photograph was taken. The plantation ledger gave her the first lead. On April 20th, 1863, just 5 days after the photo, an entry read, 23 Negroes sent for transport to Texas. Overseer Jackson in charge. Arrival expected June 1863. But this move wasn't just a trip. It was a long, dangerous journey. Rachel found Confederate transport records that detailed the route, from Belterre to Shreveport by wagon, then a long overland path through eastern Texas to a plantation near Houston owned by one of Beaumont's relatives. The trip would take nearly 6 weeks, cutting through areas where Union and Confederate forces were still fighting. The records were incomplete, but Rachel worked with what she could find. In late April, Union cavalry had started disrupting Confederate supply routes across northern Louisiana. Anyone traveling that way faced serious risk. One Union officer's report, dated May 3, 1863, mentioned a group they had stopped, intercepted a Confederate convoy attempting to move enslaved persons from Claiborne Parish to Texas. Group included 23 individuals under the guard of 3 overseers. 14 were freed and sent to contraband camps in New Orleans. 9 and the overseers escaped during the fighting. Rachel's heart pounded. Was Benjamin in the group that escaped, or the one that was freed? She went back to his 1865 testimony and read it more carefully. When they were moving us to Texas in May 1863, Union soldiers stopped our wagons. There was gunfire. In the chaos, I grabbed Thomas and ran toward the Union men. Sarah followed with little Benjamin, but Mama Rose was too old to run fast. Grace was in the front wagon with the overseer. By the time the shooting stopped, the first wagon was gone. They took Mama Rose and Grace and some others to Texas. I lost my mother and my youngest daughter that day. The photo, taken just weeks before, had shown the whole family together. What was meant to be a record property had unknowingly captured their final moment as a complete family. Benjamin, Sarah, Thomas, and little Benjamin had reached freedom, but Rose and 4-year-old Grace had been taken to Texas, separated from the others in the middle of confusion. Rachel uncovered more evidence of Benjamin's efforts after the war. That 1865 testimony was only the beginning. Between 1865 and 1870, Benjamin sent at least a dozen letters to various Freedmen's Bureau offices, churches, and aid groups across Texas and Louisiana. In every letter, he explained, "My name is Benjamin, formerly enslaved at Belterre Plantation in Louisiana. In May 1863, my mother Rose, age 71, and daughter Grace, age 4, were taken to a plantation near Houston, Texas, owned by the Beaumont family. I have been trying to find them since becoming free. If anyone has information, please contact the Freedmen's Bureau in New Orleans." His letters repeated the same request again and again. Rachel could tell from the handwriting that Benjamin had taught himself to read and write in the years following his escape, probably with help from Union teachers or aid workers. His penmanship improved with each letter, but the message stayed painfully consistent. Some of his letters got replies. Most of them said the same thing: no news, incomplete records, too many families searching, not enough help. The Freedmen's Bureau was overwhelmed. It was underfunded, short-staffed, and stretched thin trying to help millions of formerly enslaved people rebuild their lives, find loved ones, sign labor contracts, and access education. Many personal searches, like Benjamin's, went unanswered. But Rachel uncovered something that changed everything. Benjamin hadn't just written letters. In 1866, he went to Texas himself. A Freedmen's Bureau agent in Houston recorded his visit. Benjamin arrived at this office seeking information about his mother and daughter, believed to be in the Houston area. He brought written descriptions and mentioned a photograph taken in Louisiana in 1863, which he believed could help identify his family. He was given a list of local plantations where people from Louisiana may have been relocated. He plans to visit each one in person. Rachel paused, moved. Benjamin had likely walked from place to place, because most freed people couldn't afford other means, searching for Rose and Grace. And all along, he carried a memory of that photograph. He knew that if he ever found it, it could help prove who they were. It could show their faces, show they were connected, show they were a family. She looked back at the photograph on her screen. Benjamin stood there, hand resting on his son's shoulder. His family gathered around him. He didn't know it at the time, but he had created what might be the only proof that they had once been together. Now, Rachel wanted to understand how the photograph had survived and where it had been all this time. She returned to the documentation that came with the donated collection. The story behind the photo's survival was just as remarkable as the people in it. When Union troops captured Belterre Plantation in June 1863, they sent in a quartermaster team to collect valuable property. Captain William Morrison led the unit. Before the war, he had been a photographer. His personal journal, saved in the Massachusetts Historical Society, contained an entry from that time. Inspected the Beaumont house today. Most valuables already removed. Found detailed records and several photographs in the library. One image stood out. 23 enslaved individuals. Photograph of clarity. Their names and prices are written on the back. A harsh reminder of what we are fighting to end. People listed like furniture. I will keep this photo as evidence. Someday their families or descendants might want to know it exists. Morrison had recognized the photo's importance, though for different reasons. To him, it showed the cruelty of slavery. To Benjamin, it showed his family's love. Both meanings lived on in the photo's preservation. Morrison kept the photo through the war and took it home to Boston in 1865. His family saved it for generations, passing it down along with his Civil War records. In 2023, Morrison's great-great-great-granddaughter decided to donate her family's Civil War collection to the Smithsonian as she prepared to move out of the family home. The photo had been in Massachusetts for over 160 years, preserved but unknown to the people portrayed. Benjamin had searched for it and never found it. His descendants may have wondered if it still existed. Now, Rachel had it in front of her, but one question remained. Did Benjamin ever find Rose and Grace? Rachel dug back into Freedmen's Bureau records, determined to chase every lead. Finding a child, especially a 4-year-old girl, displaced during the war would normally be nearly impossible. But Rachel had a key advantage. She had Grace's name, approximate age, and knew she was with a woman named Rose when they were taken to Texas. She searched Bureau records from the Houston area between 1865 and 1870, looking for any reference to a woman named Rose and a girl named Grace. Most records were incomplete or missing entirely, but the ones that had survived were digitized and searchable. One entry stood out. In 1866, a Bureau agent in Houston documented an elderly woman named Rose trying to reach her son in Louisiana. Rose, about 73 years old, living with a freed family on the Harrison property near Houston. She requested help contacting her son Benjamin, believed to be in the New Orleans area. She cannot write and dictated a letter to be sent to the Bureau office in New Orleans. The age matched, the name matched, and most importantly, she was searching for a son named Benjamin in New Orleans. Rachel found the letter itself in the Bureau's New Orleans archives. Dated July 1866, it read, "My name is Rose. I'm looking for my son Benjamin. We lived on Belterre Plantation before the war. In 1863, Union soldiers stopped our wagon and we were separated. I was taken to Texas with my granddaughter, Grace. Benjamin, if you get this, we are alive. Grace is with me. We're in Houston. Please come or send word. Your mother, Rose." Rachel's hands trembled as she read. Rose had survived. Grace had survived. They had stayed together. And Rose had managed to get a message to the right place. But did Benjamin ever receive it? Rachel searched his file again, and there it was, a letter from Benjamin dated August 1866. His handwriting was stronger, more practiced now. "I received word that my mother, Rose, and my daughter, Grace, are alive in Houston. I am leaving New Orleans immediately to find them. Please tell them we never stopped searching." Benjamin, he got the letter. He responded right away. After 3 long years of hoping, he was on his way. Rachel found confirmation that Benjamin had arrived in Houston just 1 month later, in September 1866. A Freedmen's Bureau officer recorded the moment. Benjamin, formerly enslaved at Belterre Plantation, Louisiana, arrived in Houston today. With assistance, he was guided to the Harrison property where his mother and daughter are residing. I accompanied him for safety. The reunion was deeply emotional. His mother, though frail, wept when she saw him. His daughter, Grace, now 7, didn't fully remember him but had been told by her grandmother that her father had never stopped looking for her. Sarah and the boys, Thomas and little Benjamin, were still in New Orleans, waiting for news. Benjamin planned to bring Rose and Grace home, so the family could finally be whole again. Reading the dry, formal language of the Bureau's record, Rachel felt an overwhelming mix of relief and emotion. What was written in just a few plain sentences had been the end of a painful, years-long search and the beginning of healing. After 3 long years, Benjamin had found them. That photograph had been taken in April 1863, with the entire family standing together. Just 1 month later, they were torn apart. Now, in September 1866, they were reunited. But Rachel wanted to know what happened next. She searched the records and found the family listed in the 1870 census, living in New Orleans. Benjamin, age 45, was working as a laborer. Sarah, 42, was recorded as a dressmaker. Rose, now 78, wasn't working. Thomas, 16, was training to be a carpenter. Benjamin Jr., age 13, and Grace, 11, were both in school. They were together again, living freely as a family, and their children were attending school, something that would have been illegal for them just a few years earlier. Rachel kept digging, following their lives through later census records. In 1880, she found Grace again, now 21 years old, married to a man named Joseph Williams, a carpenter. They had 3 children. Grace could read and write, skills she had likely learned in the freedmen's schools that Benjamin had made sure his children attended. Then, in the 1900 census, Rachel found something that gave her chills. Grace, now 41, was listed as a schoolteacher in New Orleans. She and Joseph had 5 children. Her job title, Teacher, Negro Elementary School. The little girl, once listed with a dollar value, just 4 years old in 1863, separated from her family during the war, had grown up to become a teacher. She was educating the next generation of black children in a city where her own schooling had once been forbidden. 6 months after Rachel had first come across the photo, she organized a public event at the Smithsonian to share the story. She had spent those months not only researching Benjamin's life, but tracking down his living descendants. Using genealogical databases, church records, and help from family historians in New Orleans, she had found them. On a cool March evening in 2025, the museum auditorium was packed. Historians, educators, guests, and most importantly, 12 descendants of Benjamin and Sarah were in attendance, including 2 direct descendants of Grace. Rachel stood before a large screen. The 1863 photograph had been digitally restored and enlarged. Every face was now clear and visible. She told their story, how the photo was taken to document property, how Benjamin had quietly positioned his family with purpose, how they were forced from their home, separated, and then reunited years later. This photograph, Rachel said, was created to record people as property. Colonel Beaumont had it made to prove ownership. The photographer arranged 23 people into rows, snapped the picture, and listed their names and prices on the back. But Benjamin saw it differently. He knew this might be the only picture of his family that would ever exist. A photo meant to show property became proof of love, family, and humanity. Benjamin's legacy, remembered after 160 years.